All right. So to start with, why don't you describe for us what it was like before knowing your purpose versus after knowing your purpose?
Okay. So before, let me rewind a little bit. I've always been pretty introspective. Um, I say always, more so probably in my mid to late 20s, I started to become more introspective, thinking about things like purpose, core values, those kinds of things. For context, I'm 44 right now. And so, mid to late 20s. So about 20 years or so ago, kind of just noticed I was interested. Those kinds of books, self-help books, some people might call them productivity. Really now I look at them as just developmental, like people read those because they have a thirst to develop and continue to grow and improve. At least that's why I've come to understand why I was so interested in those, especially now knowing my blueprint, right? Um, so I mean, but that's kind of was kind of scattered a little bit, just common theme, but never really honed in on it or spent an inordinate amount of time like digging deep and trying to clarify things. Um, And so, wouldn't say that I wasn't, I didn't feel like I was lost or anything like that. I not, I wasn't just constantly feeling this void or searching, or it wasn't anything like that for me. What happened for me that kind of pushed me into the realm of uncovering blueprint was just about 10 years ago-ish, and the timelines are all fuzzy. Um, I was asked by my commanding officer. I was a department head in my squadron, and I was asked by my commanding officer, why do you want to continue on this path and be a commanding officer yourself one day, Jinx? To which my only immediate response, and this was in the moment, under the spotlight, I didn't have a ton of time to think about it. And so my first response was just, well, because that's what's next. That's on the path that I'm on in the military. I was in the military, I was in the Navy, helicopter pilot. So this was with my squadron commanding officer. And that was my answer. And I actually realized it in the moment that that's a pretty flimsy answer. Um, and he helped me see that too, and was like, well, this isn't for everybody, and you might want to consider why else you would want to be a commanding officer. And so I realized that, yeah, I need to begin to get a little bit more serious about examining this path I'm on in the military as a naval aviator, helicopter pilot, examining the path I'm on, and there's a pretty clear accepted path if you want to continue to succeed, as long as you take those next steps and you succeed in them, and then you continue to be offered those next steps, there's a path there. And so I just realized in that moment that I needed more clarity on the alignment between that path and choosing to stay on that, and like what resonated with me, what was important to me. Um, you know, what I don't know at the time if I would have called it my purpose, but certainly I was looking for alignment with my values, what was important to me, what my strengths were, versus where I could express those other places. Um, and so yeah, that really kick started it. So I left that command shortly after that. It was one of those kind of towards the end exit interviews or just feedback sessions with my commanding officer, and then I was moving on. Um, Again, moving on with like what I needed from that job to continue on this accepted path. Um, and from there, then I went to a kind of an intermediate job. But shortly after I got to that next job, learned that I was actually, in fact, selected to be a commanding officer. Now, from the time you're selected to the time you're actually sitting in a CO seat, that's actually a lot longer than people would would probably think. So I learned that I selected in 2017, and I didn't actually become a commanding officer until 2021. So we're talking 4 years in between. And a year and a half of that to 2.5 years of that is actually kind of a pipeline to get you trained up again to be a CO. And then you actually sit for about a year and a half as an XO, which executive officer, which is second in command at the squadron. You actually get to sit in that seat for about a year and a half prior to becoming a commanding officer. But total from I found out I was selected to sitting as a commanding officer, 4 years. So I'd say it was in that 4 years that I was just realizing not only do I need to examine the alignment, but man, I just believe that we're all kind of here for a purpose, and that we all have different gifts, no matter how alike they may seem. We have different values. Values come from all over the place, right? So values and passions and different strengths and different blind spots um, and that we all just have things. These at the time I didn't have a word for it that I would have used to like consolidate all of that stuff. Um, so I spent a couple years just going deeper. Took Red Start with Why by Simon Sinek. That was an amazing book. I took Find Your Why, which is a course that Simon Sinek offers, and he actually at the time offered it for free for military. It's an online virtual course with one part of that where we're supposed to find a friend, a peer, to actually sit down and talk through stories, and that peer was supposed to help you kind of pull out some lessons from those stories, some emotional stories, like things that you felt energy from, because that's where the gold is for like purpose, right? And for values, things that are really important to you. So I did that, um, and which was great. All these things kind of helped with clarity, helped to tune in on what was really important to me. Um, and I love it. And it was so very helpful. Fast forward to I'm sitting as the second in command of my squadron, getting ready to take command, and I'm just thinking, I'm introspective. I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, man, I would really like just a little more clarity before I take command, because I believe that to be an effective leader, and at that, I had not led at that level of responsibility yet. So we're talking 300 to 350 people, 10 naval multi-million dollar helicopters, and all the things to get ready for missions, to go on deployments. So at that time in my career I mean, it was the most responsibility as a leader that I was getting ready to take on, and I just believed from seeing other leaders that I respected who seemed to really have clarity of self, seemed to know really understand their purpose in the command and really understand their role. I just wanted a little help with that clarity, because I believed I needed it before stepping into command so that I could lead from just a place of that felt natural to me instead of trying to copy and paste other leaders that I had worked for, even the great ones. Um, and that led me to hire um, Tammy, you, for help with that. And it was called Blueprint Process. But up until that point, I had never referred to any of the things I'm talking about kind of as my blueprint. However, it all, of course, resonated because Blueprint encompasses all of those things. And it's like adds language to it. It makes it easier to talk about, like your whole self. Uh, I'll pause there because that's kind of the history to get me kind of before Blueprint.
I so appreciate it. It's interesting because as you were talking, you were helping me realize that in order to seek purpose, you kind of have to be one, introspective, and two, recognize that you are going to lead differently in your example. You even mentioned some of the greats before you, and that you didn't want to be copying and pasting their leadership style. You wanted to tap into your own unique style. That to me is profound. And I'm curious, how did you know that? Do you feel like you've always sensed that you're one of a kind, or what caused you in that moment when you were asked? So now I'm way back at the beginning, when you were asked, why do you want this next role? And your response was, because that's the next step on the path. And you recognized it, and your commanding officer recognized that that wasn't the proper answer. What, how did you know that you needed your own answer?
Um, well, I had seen examples of leaders who it seemed to me were just like reading a book and trying to copy and paste what came out of the book, and who just didn't seem natural. They seemed like they were trying to force things, you know, change just for change's sake. Um, implementing a new procedure, not because we did some extensive studying and figured that the old procedure was actually not working anymore, but just to make their mark for making their mark's sake. Um, and I'm not judging that. I'm just saying for me, it didn't resonate as how I wanted to lead. I really respected leaders that I had who it just seemed natural. And I don't believe that that you're a natural born leader. I believe that you can develop as a leader. You develop as a person, you can develop and you can be a wonderful leader, um, and not in the natural born sense. Like you never did any developing, you just naturally fall into this. However, what I saw at the time and I've come to see this as you are self-aware. And so you're confident in that. And so that brings about a natural way about you and how you interact with people and how you lead. So at the time, that's what I sensed was this just the leaders that I really resonated with. It's not that I wanted to be them and do things that they did. It's that they just seemed so confident and natural about it. And things weren't forced. It just seemed like a natural flow, like to help me bring out the best in me and for us, our unit to accomplish what our unit needed to accomplish. Um, they knew how to treat people. And so anyway, but it was that I think what clued me in that I needed to tap into myself instead of copy and paste was that was the initial thing that kind of wet the whistle, so to speak, and clued me into it was just seeing leaders I respected in that natural state. To this day, I don't know for sure because I didn't interview them. I didn't ask them about any of this. I just observed. And so I don't know for sure that they were leaning into their natural self, and that's what I was seeing. I can't say for sure because I didn't ask them. I just get the sense that that was it, and I had that sense prior to taking command, and so I really wanted to gain even more clarity. And I think that, and to take it a little bit further, I had. I mean, one of the first exercises I did with you was actually before we even started working one on one. I did the bullhorn exercise. And I was pretty easily able to go through that and just like get all this down on paper, values, passions, what I would talk to my people about, like all these things. And then I was able to clarify it with a little help from you. But that was a largely self-guided exercise. So I had a whole bunch of this in me. I was able to actually get it on paper. Although I will say that that was the first time that, sure, I did it myself, but I used your prompt and then I actually took it seriously, sat down and carved the time out, that intentionality, and wrote it down. And so that helped tremendously. I mean, I was able to get a first draft of a philosophy from that, um and uh but the clarity I was looking for was actually it was like clarity and simplification because I wanted to be able to access that at any moment in any situation, especially when there was no uh, checklist to tell me what to do, when I was dealing with a situation that I needed to kind of be able to be agile in my thinking. And I don't even know if I described it like that at the time, but looking back, that's it. I wanted clarity, but not like, oh, this is crystal clear, these million different things, right? It was clarity and useful simplicity. Like, not only did I want the clarity, but I wanted to be able to draw on it with ease. And that's where I think I sensed that I needed help um, doing that. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your
Oh,
question? I
it's
forget what the question
lovely.
was, by the way.
Totally fine. No, you did great. I loved where you took us. It was another journey back into your own personal story, which is so helpful. Thank you so much for being willing to share that. So
Yeah.
I recognized that. So my question was, how did you know that you had your own way? And you answered by saying, you saw in the leaders, and because of the military, you've had a lot of experience following different leaders. And in that experience, you saw kind of two camps, a group that seemed to be just natural and effortless in their leadership style, whereas others seemed a little bit more forced. And you believed, this is something new that I just heard, is you believed you had your own natural, and that's what you wanted to access as a tool for, as you just described, that agile maneuvering as the circumstances around you change, which of course was going to happen in your upcoming leadership role as well as in your personal life.
Yeah. And you stirred something else for me too. It's very common in the military, especially when you're dealing with good leaders who will try to help mentor you and help you see that you need to tap into your own leadership style. They call it a leadership style. So that probably played a role in me recognizing this too. Yeah, I have had leaders and I've read books and I've seen several different times throughout my life where you need to tap into your own leadership style because trying to be somebody you're not won't work, and that applies in a whole bunch of situations.
Absolutely. No, that's a good point of proof that you had people around you talking about your own leadership style and prompting you, including the CEO who said to you, "That's not a good answer. You need to find your own
Yeah,
answer." So, and also, as you identified early on in our conversation, that you've always been introspective, or maybe not always, but at least since your 20s, you've been introspective. You've naturally studied yourself. And wouldn't you say that that's a kind of inherent component for someone who's seeking their purpose? They must also be introspective, wouldn't you say?
yeah, I would say yes, and I could also see another camp of people who are facing some kind of major life test, challenge, something that would take somebody, whether they're introspective or not, but something so life changing, life altering, existential that it would make them question like everything up until that point and begin to consider, now what? What am I supposed to do? This has been my whole life. Nothing's working now, as an example. So I think there are definitely introspective people who are interested in this and for whatever reason throughout their lives. And who knows, maybe there could have been something even earlier that I'm not thinking about that prompted me to do that. I just can't think about it right, can't think of it right now. So I think introspective, yes, and there's categories of people who they just face existential changes or something just forces them to like seek it.
That's powerful. So introspective and or a life event occurs that causes them, like you yourself are going through one right now. It's a transition where
Yeah,
you're prompted with the question, okay, now what? And then the third option that you shared, which is brilliant, is when what they've been doing is no longer working, even if
yeah,
nothing's changed outside of them, they feel like they're beaten against a wall where they used to be able to unlock the door. So yeah, that's a powerful recognition.
yeah, yeah.
So in your
And,
own,
and I
yeah.
think that and I actually think that mine was a combo. I'm introspective. However, there was a triggering event. It wasn't existential, it wasn't a crisis. However, it was going into the most drastic, biggest change in leadership environment and responsibility that I was going into in my entire life. So that is a major transition event. And when you couple that with what I already believed and what I had already considered myself to be and what I was already kind of studying about myself, that's a powerful combination.
Hmm. Yeah, do you mind if we share what your transition is?
Well, I was talking about just the transition moving into becoming a commanding officer.
Oh, got
Um,
it.
so we can talk about my transition now if you want. I just don't know where you want to take the conversation because now I have hindsight of uncovering my blueprint, working with you, and having that knowledge and continuing to define it, redefine it, work with it over the course of 4 years now. So the transition I'm facing now versus that transition, there's differences there.
Oh, for sure. So this, to me, this is significant because you're not just changing employers, you're becoming your own employer.
Yeah.
And after being in a career for how long? 20 some years.
26 years if you count my fourth Naval Academy, which I do.
As you should. So that's I think the world would agree, that's a pretty significant shift to happen mid 40s. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's go into the second half of my question, which is okay, now what? You've got you know your blueprint, you've known it for some years. You know what your purpose and cause is today. You understand it. As you understand it today, you can talk about it. We know that it's an always it's an infinite journey, as we
Yeah.
say in principle number 4. So, how has it been going through this mid-career, pretty major shift? How how has that transition occurred for you because you know your purpose? In other words, how has the purpose helped?
Um,
And go ahead and share your
this,
purpose.
yeah, yeah. So this is a really, I could talk for days about this probably. If you ask me today, which you just did, versus maybe 6 months ago, it might be different. Because like you said, it's infinite and just we're always evolving and developing and growing. And if we allow it to happen, we will look at our blueprints in different ways and it'll take on different meanings. And so how has this helped me? First, I think maybe most importantly, what it did for me was just I have this self clarity. I see myself as different players, different parts, um, passions, values, strengths, purpose, cause. And I know that that doesn't matter what my job is, that that I take all that with me wherever I go. My experiences help me define it, redefine it, right? But my job titles and roles and experiences, they themselves don't define me. And something that a lot of military folks have a problem with, and I would imagine anyone transitioning out of a career they had for 20 plus years, is this idea of like identity, this idea of I'm a naval aviator because that's what I've done for 20 plus years. I am a naval aviator. So now the fact that I will never fly a naval aircraft again, likely, wow. For somebody who didn't ever do any of this work or didn't like look at the different parts of them and all of the things they bring to the table in addition to whatever they have to do as a naval aviator. And then you're going to stop doing that now and you're going to transition out into a world where that, flying 60s off the back of destroyers in the middle of the ocean at 2 a.m. on goggles, not a normal job for a civilian when you transition out. And so if you tied everything about you and your identity to that job and that role, then you're gonna I think that that's gonna make it probably more challenging for somebody as they get out.
For sure.
Because I think about that kind of stuff a little bit even now, even with the work that I've done and understanding my blueprint. It's just ingrained. And the military does such a great job of at the very beginning kind of tearing you down a little bit to kind of ensure that you're brought up into this orientation of self-sacrifice for the team and the mission and the Constitution and the country and everything's about everyone else but you. And then you leave that. It's like that's a lot. That is a lot. And so the number one thing is as I was deciding if this was the right time, because I didn't have to get out. I turned down a promotion. I could have continued in for another 8 years minimum. And had I not done this kind of work, I don't know the decision I would have made, but I can tell you it would have been a little more scary to turn down a guaranteed promotion and guaranteed pretty much 8 years of work at a great salary and benefits. It would have been a little more scary had my whole identity been tied up in I'm a naval officer, I'm a naval aviator, I'm a helicopter pilot. Like that's a really tough break. And so I know that that has helped me tremendously and given me the courage to be able to look at some of the other, to be able to look at my purpose, to be able to look at the continued, probably projected path if I'm in versus how I can express my purpose and cause in other ways and express other players on my blueprint in other ways that even if I've had alignment of purpose, which I have in the military, by the way, um, even if I've had that alignment, there's been some players on my team who just they don't really get a lot of chance to shine as much as maybe they can on the outside. And it's like, well, what would happen if they got in the game? Right. So because I'm not tied to this idea of I got out, now who am I? I already kind of have a good sense of that. That was the first and foremost thing that how Blueprint really helped me to make this decision to transition out of the military at this time of my life.
It's powerful, what you're saying. And I think people so subconsciously see themselves as labels. If they were asked
Yeah.
directly, do you see yourself as your job? They'd probably say no. But and you're, I understand what you're saying. The whole thing that you just described to me, 2 a.m. in the morning with goggles, flying off the back of a carrier. I had a vision and thought, whoa, that's a huge culture shift that you've gone through. And yet you see yourself as something above all of that as it relates to your purpose and cause. Can you share for us what your purpose and cause are?
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm in the middle, and you know this. I'm in the middle of kind of redoing my tower and just looking at how I'm defining this purpose and cause. But it essentially it is to help my teammates, and my teammates are they could be actual teammates at work. They could be my friends, could be my wife and kids, could be my other family members. Essentially, they're the people in my life who I really care about, and I believe they care about me. And together we can do things, right? Do great things, and great is personally defined, right? But we there's a mutuality there. So, right, it's to help. empower my teammates to bring their whole selves to bear on whatever situation it is. And so that then they can do that for their teams as well and just spread that, have that chain reaction of just helping people lean into their whole selves and really change the world. But yeah, that's how I see it
That's
right now.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the way that you're talking about it. First of all, that it is an ongoing understanding. So your understanding today is it's like walking up a mountain. You know, the higher you get, the more view you see, and that's the same way
Yeah.
with purpose. So I appreciate that ongoing realization. I also love the way your purpose and cause, and this is what we know to be true about purpose and cause, is that it really matches what we've already done in our lives and are continuing to do. So, listening to you and hearing your story, it really brings home how you've done your purpose for yourself and are continuing to do it. And because you've done it for yourself, you're now able to do it with other people. And that is the ultimate satisfaction for you, of course.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned that if you look at your entire blueprint, all of those pieces and parts that enable you to have the clarity for the mental agility that you were talking about before, the specificity, the simplicity, the clarity makes it so powerful to pick up those individual tools and use them. You mentioned that in your career as a military officer, you were able to use a lot of your blueprint.
Hmm.
And there were some players, pieces and parts that were not able to be used. And you're excited about the potential and possibility of what will it be like when they get on the court. So if you could describe for us a comparison from what you were doing before in the military to what you're doing now as a coach, as a leadership coach, what percentage of players do you feel like you were able to use over as an overall average in your duties in the military versus what percentage you're able to use today?
Um, well, I don't know. That's a tough question. And when you try to put it into percentages of how much, so the very first time I went through the tower creation and I had my purpose and cause, and this is a phrase that sticks with me still, and it's a way to simplify the way I just described my purpose and cause. It's a way to simplify it so that I know what it means immediately. And it made it easier in command and remember, I was looking for clarity and simplicity so that I could draw on it. And so what I described as my purpose and cause 5 minutes ago to you, I know what that means to me when I say raise yourself, raise your team. And so I could go into just about every situation. I mean, I can't think of a
Mm,
situation right now where I couldn't draw on raise yourself, raise your team. I mean, if I was talking to the command about the latest COVID restrictions, because I was the commanding officer, XO and commanding officer when COVID kicked off in the United States. So 2020, 2022, essentially that period. And I could go into any situation. And if I just remembered raise yourself, raise your team. Okay, what are we doing right now to build our own resilience? What are we doing to prepare ourselves for what's to come so that then we can come to work, do the same things for our teams, or even at home, we can do the same things for our family because it's a tough time, right? I could take that, and I didn't know. By the way, I guess I did hire you, and it was 20, so I guess it was 2020. So it was during COVID. So as I think about it now, man, COVID was another event, life events. We're talking about major life events in my lifetime anyway. It was, I hadn't seen much like that. And yeah, and so I hired you kind of at the end of 2020 is when I hired you to start working with me because I took command in 21. Um, so anyway, so I had kind of been dealing with COVID here and there throughout, and then just having as I took the helm, so I was dealing with it as second in command though. So I was helping advise my CO and the commands, although I was second in command and they looked to me as a leader of the command, it's just different when you're the number one in command at a unit. And so I just knew I needed to take this. And so that was something simple that helped me think about my purpose and cause in every moment while I was in any situation. I could relate it to that. And I could then speak to people at a deeper level than just, you just got to do this because, you know, which is required in the military sometimes. There are situations where that is absolutely required, and you rely on that military structure when something has to get done right away, but there's just no time, then we follow orders and we do it. But really, as soon as there is time, we need to be thinking about deeper purpose. Um, and I was prepping my command to go to sea, and we weren't in the middle of a deployment. So I really had, I could, I could afford to go deeper. And raise yourself, raise your team was a way for me to go deeper. Okay. So I say that to tell you, I was connected to my purpose and cause every day as a CO. And then fast forward to now, I've been a leader development professor at the Naval War College. My classes are senior military leaders who, some are getting ready to make this very transition that I'm talking about when I became a CO. Some are actually moving on from that and going to the next level that, when I decided to get off that path, they're going on that path. And then it became about leader development, which is all about raise yourself so that you can go back to those units you're going to go to and raise your team. So again, just every day living in my purpose. Now there were things that sometimes you have to do things that you're told to do, and you really don't have much of a choice. And so, right. So there were less players. So now to your question of the percentage of players, there's less players maybe in the game as you are still expressing your purpose and cause in whatever you're being told to do or whatever you have to do. Um, and so I guess I hit a point where I don't know. So in the Navy, once you put on O6, and you pretty much go where they tell you to go. You're going to be a staff, you're going to be working for flag officer, and it can be pretty much anywhere. And you don't have a ton of real control or influence over where you go. And so that's where I started to say, okay, well, even if I can express purpose and cause and find that, and I'm sure I would had I stayed in, I'm sure I would. I loved my time. Um, you started to look at, well, okay, yes, I will be able to express purpose and cause, and I might not have the chance to put in some of my other players, specifically creativity and um, independence and autonomy and the ability to flex and kind of follow my intuition a little bit more. All these things are they're part of my blueprint. Um, you know, you can pause the video if you're watching a video and zoom in and you can see these things on my blueprint. And so, not that I couldn't ever, those players were never in the game. I'm not saying that they were never in the game, but just in a way now where they could almost be like this. If you think of basketball, it's like I've had a starting five, and some of these players I just mentioned, like independence and autonomy, maybe that was the sixth man or one of the substitutes. What will happen now? What will happen if I get a new starting five, or I get some of these other players as my starting five who are I'm able to tap into more naturally, more freely, more creatively? What could happen? And I don't know. I'm not saying that it'll be better. I'm not saying that it'll be more aligned with purpose and cause because I don't know that yet. The point for me is I hit a place where I wanted to give them a chance. I wanted to give the other players a shot and put them in the game, not because I think the grass is always greener, not because I had this horrible time, because you've heard me talk. I've loved it. I've loved my time. Just because I just want to know. I just want to know what's possible. Um, I just want to know what's possible when those players have a chance to get in the game.
I love that recognition of curiosity, which was part of what you were talking about, and possibility, endless possibility. And you intuitively understood that if you stayed on that path, which would have been the easier, logical, more money, more benefits, more security, whatever. And I know you loved the people there too. So you had a lot of things
Yeah.
pulling you to stay. But this curiosity, this fascination of what's possible, that power, the potential, just woke that up in you. And would you say is helping you be courageous?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And I don't know. I was never, um, I'm in my head a lot, right? I've always been a thinker, a reflector. And I don't know that I ever, prior to uncovering Blueprint, I don't know that I ever would trust my, I mean, hang with me here.
Hmm.
I definitely built enough confidence in what I was doing in the military to trust my instincts when it came to my job, when it came to flying helicopters, to learn to kind of be confident and trust these things that my training, the process I went through, right, to trust all of that. However, it always for me started in the mind and thinking through. And I used to be a person, I got to have more information. Excuse me, I got to have more information, more information. Now, becoming a CEO, it makes you realize you're never going to have all the information. So but again, that's cognitive. I was told that. And it's like, so I'm like, okay, I'm never going to have all the information. So what do I need to make the best decision I can make in the moment? I was never, though, what I would have considered like in tune with how I was feeling, like listening to the body and just really like giving my gut a really, really big say in what I was doing next. And this journey of self clarity and blueprint process has really sparked some other journeys. I've done other coaching programs. I mean, I followed my passion for coaching as a way to empower, which is right there in my purpose. And that has helped me realize that led me to some relationships and meeting some people who were in the academic space, so back to the mind, but who are studying some of these other things that are happening really inside the body neurologically when you have feelings, gut feelings, like where actually it becomes more than gut. It's like where in your body do you feel that right now? And as you learn to tap it, right? So it just sparked the courage to even more so listen to even more of what my blueprint and I bring to the table. It certainly sparked that journey for me to get to where I am right now.
No, that's super cool. And I know that in this transition, going from a 20 some year full-time employer that had at least another 8 year path for you secured
Yeah.
into your own business, what a powerful shift that was for you to make decisions, especially big, hairy life decisions like that one, based on information, to set that aside and to let your gut, your instinct have more of a role in your decision making. Talk about courage.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're making a decision, you're not sitting there thinking, man, I am really courageous right now making this decision. You know, uh,
How would you describe it?
well, I would just say that I'm listening. I'm willing to listen to myself. I'm willing to listen to others, but I'm willing to be more in tune with just, what I just talked about. I'm willing to do that and kind of without knowing. Because another thing I've learned in the last 4 or 5 years is what really do you know about what's going to happen in the future. There's so much out of your control that really you only really control like the decisions you're making right now, um, and the actions you're taking right now. Because you don't even know if you'll have the opportunity to take that action in an hour, let alone 8 years down the road, right? And that all just contributes to what I call the someday trap, which is just this idea that, oh, as soon as I finish the X, I'll do Y. As soon as yeah, I think it'd be really cool to start my own coaching business. Let me just finish this next tour. Let me just get to the end of my 8 years, this 8 more years. Let me get to 30 in the military. Um, and then I'll do it someday. The problem is I don't control my ability to be able to do that in 8 years. I have no idea where I'll be or even if I'll still be here. And so that's the someday trap. Because what if someday never comes? And oh, by the way, what if on some freak chance I got another promotion? So then instead of 8 years, now I'm at the next level where I can just even go beyond that. And that's the idea that there's always, so like you want to do Z. So as soon as I finish X, I'll do Z. The problem is when you finish X, there's going to be a Y, and then there's going to be a Y alpha and a Y Bravo. Before you know it, you actually never get to Z. That's another way to look at the someday trap. Um, so yeah, I do think it takes, if I could step outside of myself, it would take somebody, it would be courageous for somebody because to me it's courage when there's some fear, there's some trepidation, there's some anxiety, there's something that you would like to just easily back away from it, but you move forward anyway. So that's, if you define courage like that, and as I step out, yes, this decision was courageous, and
Mhm.
anybody making a decision like that, it's
Mhm.
courageous. um yeah.
And I know that it wasn't the courage isn't just in the moment of making the decision, right? Because I have the honor of hanging out with you, I know that it's been an
Yeah.
ongoing choice to be courageous. So how would you, and let's wrap up with this, how do you do that? How, what do you do? What is your personal routine or go to daily be courageous?
Well, this is evolving for me. Um, if you asked me a year ago, I would say knowledge of blueprint and just this self-clarity and clarity of purpose. Um, Now it's probably more my belief that I'm not gonna, that I don't control. And I mentioned this earlier, that I don't control everything or anything except for my own personal actions, right?
Mhm.
I act, and then there's a way I think things are going to go. I have some influence, but who knows what happens once that action's out there that could stop me. And so that really lets you know that, gosh, whether I stay, whether I get out, whether I try this new business venture, whether I don't, whether I put a video out, whether I don't, whether I call this person, whether I don't, whether I go to this networking event, whether I don't, like outside of me just deciding to do it, I don't know what's going to happen anyway with any of that. Um, and so actually, as you accept that, I found that I am more willing to just, let's just see where this goes. Let's just do it. We'll be all right in the end. And so a lot of that has also resulted in getting into receive mode. We've talked about, just at times when you're just I'm just like banging my head, like, what should I be doing next? how should I alter this newsletter? How should I, getting inside my head and just wondering what do I need to do next? Just boom and like doing these different things. Receive mode is more, okay, what can I do to actually tap into God and however you define God, which I'm actually doing that still, defining God for myself, right? But God just being just the infinite that's out there, the energy that's out there, all the other people and all their blueprints and all the nature and just everything out there. Like, how can I tap into some of that energy? How can I get into receive mode? And so it's like,
Hmm, very cool. Thank you. I appreciate you walking through not only your current understanding of receive mode, but also how you get yourself into receive mode. I just so appreciate the journey that you're on with courage and that the recognition that it comes from a different place than your own knowledge or strength or whatever. So thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anything else you want to
yeah,
say before I cut the recording off? No, I'm really appreciative. Thank you. Hang on.